And hello, we're back. This time in Fundamentals, Lesson 1 Principles and Concepts of Jointness. Now, this lesson has 15 pages worth of words. So, obviously, I will not be stopping, but to breathe in between sentences. The contents include why joint, the joint functions command and control, the joint functions information, the joint functions intelligence, the joint functions fires, the joint functions movement and maneuver, the joint functions protection, the joint functions sustainment. There's a student activity included, the joint interorganizational and multinational environment, the U.S. interagency and space, coalition, allied, and multinational operations, and joint all domain operations. IDE graduates may find themselves increasingly working in the joint and interorganizational environment where they are tasked to solve complex or ill defined problems. This lesson explores why U.S. forces organize to fight jointly and how the joint functions serve as categories of fundamental operational thought and planning. The lesson also introduces the organizational framework for operations that include interorganizational partners. Why joint? Armed forces can be organized by fight jointly. Correction. Armed forces can be organized to fight jointly, but they do not. Oh gosh. But do they really fight jointly? Just how joined must they be to be honestly characterized as joint? It is a somewhat open question whether a master campaign plan that has ground, land, sea, air, and now space component subplans truly constitutes a single project rather than simply the stapling together of each major military preferred stakeholder's preferred course of action. Word, Colin Gray. I'm not sure who Colin Gray is, but um, probably should have his title or something on there. Just Marine Corps General Joe Dunford, Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff, April 21st, 2016. Time for a new picture. What does the term joint mean? Put simply, participation by two or more military services. Joint Publication 1, Doctrine for the Armed Forces of the United States. Pay no attention to the idiot, it's just my kid. Defines joint operations as operations or organizations in which elements of two or more services from military departments participate. It is critical for all military members to fundamentally understand joint operations because, as a rule, the U.S. military fights jointly. That is, the baseline approach to leverage military force against any problem set will be a joint approach, using resources from multiple services which must integrate into a joint force. As you view the following briefing, think about your own experience thus far in your career and potential future operations in which you may participate that involve a joint environment. What are the current and historical challenges to operating jointly, as well as dangers or failing to do so? Student activity. The presentation below gives the historical backdrop that illustrated the need for operating in a joint context, a brief history of Goldwater Nichols, and an overview of how the individual services fit into the broader joint picture. It concludes with an overview of joint command relationships. As you view it, consider where you currently fit in the big joint picture. In your current and previous assignments, has joint doctrine or service doctrine been more pertinent for you thus far? What emerging situations do you observe that might not be fully covered by existing joint or service doctrine? So, all wonderful questions. Um, Personally, has joint doctrine or service doctrine been more pertinent for you thus far? No. I worked at AFCENT, which is Air Force Central Command, where the Air Force had, for the CENTCOM AOR, I think we were the, don't give me the line, TACON, OPCON, ADCON. I don't know, honestly. Um, but I can say, while I was there at Absent, the emphasis was not on, for me, was not on the big picture. It was very tunnel vision into operations. And when I say operations, I'm talking combat support operations within the airfield operations field. So I was the deputy there for a year, and we had a very interesting structure, but it wasn't um, joint per se, not interorganizational, and definitely not with other countries. I did not feel a joint anything. Um, so there is a activity here, joint fundamentals, the Air University Joint 601S joint fundamentals. Why does joint matter? Why does joint matter? Roles and missions. The U.S. Armed Forces fulfill unique and crucial roles, defending the U.S. against all adversaries while serving the nation as a bulwark and the guarantor of its security and independence. Nature of the challenge. The nature of the challenge to the U.S. and its interests demand that the armed forces operate as a closely integrated joint team with interagency and multinational partners across the range of military operations. That is how you want to use your language. It says interagency and multinational partners. I think that is where our language should be for the lesson plan. Law. What's the law that's governing this? Goldwater Nichols Department of Defense Reorganization Act of 1986. So what happened in 1985 or 1984? On Operation Eagle Claw, on several occasions in history, lack of a joint structure produced disastrous results. A clear example was Operation Eagle Claw, the failed rescue attempt of American hostages from Iran in 1980. Eight American servicemen, oh, this was before I was born, eight American servicemen lost their lives. Iran? So they've been out of pocket for, what, 40 years now. An Air Force EC 130 Hercules aircraft and a Navy RH 53 Sea Stallion helicopter were destroyed at the Desert One landing site in Iran. Five other RH 53s were abandoned for lack of fuel. Here is where history is so important. I probably should have heard of this event, but being a not an ROTC and not an academy grad, um, I have never heard of this event. If I have, I don't remember. There's a video to watch below. The required video. The video below illustrates the risk and consequences of not understanding training or operating as a joint force. An already complex and dangerous mission, rescue of American hostages from Iran, was further complicated by inter-service rivalry, ignorance, and failure to train as a unified force. Operation Eagle Claw remains a prime example of operational failure that highlighted the need for better joint force organization. Unfortunately, lessons have to be learned, lives have to be lost for great organizational change. And it looks like this operation, Operation Eagle Claw, was the one that did it for us in joint warfare, interagency warfare. So I'm only going to do 15 minutes today, not maybe not quite 15 minutes, but this is going to be a short video because I have 15 pages, and I also have to go pick my son up. So probably should have planned that better. Anyway, required reading materials. JP, Joint Publication 1, Doctrine of the Armed Forces of the United States, 2017. Read page I-2. All right. The joint functions. Across the range of military operations, joint forces conduct many types of missions that vary greatly in purpose, complexity, scope, and tempo, among many other variables. Such operations may be a kind often performed before, or they may be emerging, requiring new approaches or organization. Joint forces also operate across the various levels of war as required, tactical, operational, and strategic. With such a varied landscape of potential operations and missions, JFCs and their planning staffs need a categorization system to organize and plan the force's activities, capabilities, and tasks. For Joint Publication 3-0, that system is precisely what the joint functions are. Related capabilities and activities group together to help JFCs integrate, synchronize, and direct the complex and diverse tasks involved in joint operations. A brief overview of each of the seven joint functions is listed below. Command and control, information, intelligence, fires, movement and maneuver, protection, sustainment. Command and control, the exercise of control and direction of forces. This calls for collaboration and requires robust communications. Information helps commanders and staffs understand and leverage the pervasive nature of information, its military uses, and its application during all military operations. Intelligence allows commanders to understand their operational environment. It also includes counterintelligence activities. Fires includes targeting, strikes, and assessments, both lethal and non lethal. It supports all other functions. Movement and maneuver includes movement, deployment into the operational area, and movement to stage for offensive defensive purposes. It can be combined with fires to achieve positions of advantage. Con- Protection, conserving the joint forces' warfighting potential, including defense against enemy attacks as well as protection from fratricide and emergency responses to attacks and or crises. Provision of support to maintain or prolong operations until a mission is accomplished includes all types of operational support, personnel supply, host nation, etc. By providing a common lexicon for how to think about and discuss complex joint operations, the joint functions can tremendously streamline planning efforts across various services and communities. If a naval aviator begins discussing the EA 6B's capabilities with a marine engineer, there may be confusion. But if he frames it in joint functions language, we have an airborne platform that can deliver non lethal fires in support of your objectives. The context is set for understanding. Many planners who may know little of another service operations or tactical detail do know the joint functions, which can serve to put things into commonly understood categories. This is one tremendous value of the functions. Although the joint functions can be understood separately, it is critical to see how they reinforce the complement one another and complement one another. JP3-0 emphasizes that integration across the functions is essential to mission accomplishment. Examples of such integration abound. Imagine an area with a significant concentration of friendly troops and assets. Protecting a joint function of this area is critical. How can the area be secured? Another joint function, fires, can do so by dispersing or disrupting enemy threats to the area. A ground force conducting movement and maneuver must be protected. Also, its capacity to sustain offensive operations for a time must be preserved. But enemy ambushes or other hazards along its route threaten to degrade this. How can such threats be mitigated? One way is to leverage intelligence to discern the location of such threats, then adjust the scheme of maneuver to avoid them. JP3-0 sums up this kind of cross leveraging. In any joint operation, the JFC can choose from a wide variety of joint and service capabilities and combine them in various ways to perform joint functions and accomplish the mission. And unfortunately, that is all for today's video. I will be back. Hopefully, we can get the kids situated and cooperating a little bit better. Hopefully, we can close that door to that closet. And yeah, thanks.